Greetings. Welcome to South Florida Innovators. I'm your host, H. Lee Tony of the Miami-Dade College Carrie P. Meek Entrepreneurial Education Center. At South Florida Innovators, we have the privilege of interviewing interesting people who are doing work with entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation in the South Florida area. And today my guest is Mr. José Estabil, a Miami native, a graduate of Southwest High School, and has gone on to many accomplishments that we'll talk about over the next hour. But we're here to talk about innovation. Welcome to South Florida Innovators.
You. Pleasure to be here.
So you're currently establishing a program with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in Russia called Skolkovo. Did I do that right, Skolkovo?
Yes, that's the
Skolkovo
Institute of Science and Technology.
Great.
In fact, I just joined them as a full-time staff member, helping to promote the graduate program in research and investigation and innovation that we've been establishing with MIT. So for the last 4 years, I helped set up the universities on the MIT side of the relationship, and going forward now I'll be on the Skolkovo side of the relationship.
And so we'll definitely talk about your work abroad and your work in Russia, but you're also on the board of advisor for the Miami-Dade College Idea Center.
I am indeed,
And
yes.
we really want to talk about that work and your role in shaping that center. And I really want to drill down even more on your work with Miami-Dade College students and entrepreneurship and innovation and how that is really taking hold in our community. So talk to me about how you came to be involved with the Idea Center and what the Idea Center is and how it serves our students.
So the Idea Center is a place for all Miami-Dade College students, regardless of campus, to use as a place to catalyze their aspirations and dreams about either owning their own business or participating in a new business. The Idea Center was founded on the principle of entrepreneuring, of teaching people how to be able to start these businesses and run them, and to act as a catalyst to connect the community, the greater community around Miami and in Broward, to Miami-Dade students for the purpose of helping to absorb them and their ideas, either when they're students or after they graduated. It's currently being led by Leandro Finol, who is an accomplished serial entrepreneur and is bringing his energy and love of building companies and teams into the center. And we're very lucky to have him.
So as a native Miamian, and Miami being a highly immigrant community who are highly entrepreneurial, how does the Idea Center help to advance that work, or what does it bring into the landscape to really help accelerate entrepreneurship?
That's a great question. So it does so on several points. First, it creates a space for meeting and celebration so that entrepreneurs of high profile can come and speak to students. As a place of convening, it also enables students to take meetings or to use the space for workshops or others that they might propose. Third, there's programming, co-curricular programming that they develop that brings skills that would be hard for students to gain otherwise in their day-to-day lives at MDC. For example, in software, where they've partnered with Code Launch for a program to get students to learn how to code and then go into careers in coding, as well as other hackathons. In fact, this weekend, the Startup Bootcamp, which is Europe's largest accelerator, will be hosting a hackathon with MIT Hack Medicine that will bring members of the community as well as MDC students together for the purpose of solving a problem in medicine and hacking through it over the course of a weekend for the production of solutions to them that could be then the kernel or an engine for a startup that could come from it. But fundamentally, it's a place to catalyze the connection. Entrepreneurship is a contact sport. Like medicine, it has a clinical component. It needs to be practiced. And so the Idea Center is that place of focus. And as I said, it has an MDC college-wide mission. It's not just it's located at the Wolfson campus, but it's meant to serve all of the campuses in the constellation.
So I'm sure some of the questions you get refer to this growth in technology, entrepreneurship, innovation, this conversation. Miami's efforts, Silicon Beach, is that what they're calling it? Is comparing us to Silicon Valley in California.
Yeah.
But I imagine it's going to be dramatically different in Miami because our landscape and our population is dramatically
hope
different
so.
than what you may find in the Bay Area. How is this connecting to our students, being that we are at our heart a community college? Are you finding that students are resonating to the opportunities that are being provided?
I think so. We see early signs of success, but I think there are at least 2 or 3 points in that I'd like to bring back. First, Silicon Valley is in California, right? And gosh, I hope it's not Silicon Valley here. It'd be funny if it were Silicon Beach, but I think Miami is a community, both of immigrants, but of entrepreneurs. And entrepreneuring, after all, is the discipline of starting businesses, of starting and growing them. So per se, it's not related to technology. And so that's the second part of it. How does it serve our communities? These are skills that can be practiced, whether it's a restaurant that you want to start, or whether it's a hair care salon, or an IT firm, or something with stronger technology roots, whether it's in medicine and materials or in IT. And so the center has programs that bring students in. I mentioned the CS program, but they have others.
You mentioned Launch Code and CX50, absolutely. And there are a lot of really amazing partnerships that are becoming available. You were here today as a part of our Malls program and spoke to 100 students at the North Campus. What is that like when you're engaging directly with students and letting them know that their ideas, their experiences can have entrepreneurial implications and that they can find support through the Idea Center?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was reflecting on that as I was walking to this interview. There's such eagerness and such attention and such, I think, aspiration, what I could see in the audience as I was speaking. And I kept thinking that was me many years ago, but still when I was young and I was starting on my journey at MDC at the Kendall campus. And I kept thinking that it was a little bit like explaining to somebody how it feels to be wet. It's so much easier if you could somehow bring their finger in contact with some water so that they could understand that it's not a logical concept. It's a concept that has to be experienced to be understood. And if somehow I could, in some small way, validate what their aspirations are by being up there and sharing my experiences, I thought that was worthwhile, even if there's only one student out of that 100 that is listening. And I had an opportunity to speak to about 20 of the students ahead of time. They represented a huge cross-section from veterinary science to medical science to EMT to film to criminology, nursing. There was just such a broad set of students, and I know that everybody wants to find their own way. And I think innovation and entrepreneurship is a set of skills or kind of thinking and attitude that's applicable to anything that you go do, not just in starting a business, but sort of how you approach doing things on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent.
And so I hope that's helpful.
That is, and we're going to pick that up and drill down a little more when we come back from our break. We're going to take a break for a moment. I hope you'll stay with us. My guest today is José Estabil, and we'll be talking about innovation in Miami and Miami-Dade College. Thank you.
Cool programs for hot jobs. Let Miami-Dade College jumpstart your career. We offer bachelor's degrees in film and TV production, nursing, electronics engineering, information systems technology, supervision and management, supply chain management, or choose from 300 other programs to study. You can take classes during the day, evening, weekend, or online. For more info, visit MDC.edu or call 305-237-8888. Get the knowledge and training for today's in-demand jobs. Register now. Miami-Dade College.
Be creative. Be a hero. Be the solution. Be connected. Be innovative. Be global. Be successful. Be you. Be MDC. Be Miami-Dade College.
Hello and welcome back to South Florida Innovators. I'm your host, H.G. Tony, and my guest today is Mr. José Estabil, who is an advisor to the Miami-Dade College Idea Center and also the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation Programs for Skolkova, which is a collaboration between Skolkova and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And has done amazing work abroad. But we were talking about students before we went to break, and kind of how what your work is in helping the college to shape its entrepreneurial agenda, what programs to bring in, how to make those experiences meaningful to our students. We're highly immigrant. We are a community of color, Latinos, African Americans, folks from the Caribbean. How do we know what it is that we can do to expose our students to entrepreneurship as a real opportunity? Because a lot of parents want them to go to school and be a nurse and a teacher and a firefighter. These are things that they can get their arms around. How do you get your arms around entrepreneurship as a field? And how do you convey that message in a community like ours that's diverse as Miami?
So I think that's a great question, and that's at the heart of what the Idea Center was established to do. So the way it does so is based on growing evidence of programs that do work. So it's taking or adapting from well-established programs at Cornell, at Stanford, at MIT as examples, but translating them into the environment here. And the salient component of it that we think is important in the Idea Center is this notion of practice, of learning by doing. And that's a key aspect. Each of those schools that I mentioned before has branded this learning in different ways, and you hear things like experiential learning or you hear action learning, but fundamentally it's what the clinical part of a medical school program is. So you could learn about medicine from a book, but until you're practicing it at the bedside and doing the clinical part, you don't get to integrate the skills and knows what it means. But as important to doing that if you are a doctor is thinking in a way that's evidence-based and as a doctor. And so entrepreneurial thinking is about applying the set of problem-solving skills, of being able to listen to potential customer and then adapting them, whether you're a nurse, firefighter, or an EMT, or a police person. These are skills that you can use day to day. And so the idea is to provide a place where students can come practice that. And then the mechanisms through which it's done are co-curricular programs, and that's the catch-all that are non-credit bearing courses. And these are things like hackathons, competitions, pitching, meaning sharing presentations to an audience you don't know, elevator pitches, mechanisms of communication that are to the point and hopefully present what you think about a topic in a quick manner. And these are the mechanisms. And then the third is tying them into the investment and the entrepreneurial community in the greater Miami area. And there are a lot of people. There are other advisors that are at the Idea Center with a lot of experience and success in business, but then also a number of other organizations that are friendly, whether it's with the Cambridge Innovation Center, which is going to open up a branch here in Miami to start a boot camp to 500 startups, the communities that are around the University of Miami and FIU also, because this is one network that's interconnected. And in fact, it's sort of at a pre-competitive stage where any kind of investment in any one of those communities helps all of the communities move forward. And especially for immigrants and children of immigrants, being able to establish your own business or your own livelihood is what opportunity is supposed to provide. And so we think it's a very valid way as a choice, because not every student wants to be a doctor or a nurse or an EMT or a policeman. Some students want to be their own boss and run their own business.
So how do you see the work that you're involved in with the college expanding? We're here at the North Campus. You spoke to a group of North Campus students today. How can a North Campus student get engaged or get supported in their entrepreneurial ideas? They think they've got the next big thing, or they just have a problem, even a social problem that they may want to apply some entrepreneurial thinking to. How do they connect into the resources of the Idea Center?
So it's interesting you say that. So much like I said, entrepreneuring is a contact sport. A lot of metaphors or paradigms from sports can be used here. An approach could be to use World Cup. so that every one of the campuses have a center, much like you'd have a writing center, places where students can gain support to learn how to write well. You can imagine that there could be then a center or some office at each of the campuses that could do it, and then events that would move from campus to campus, but that would in fact attract students from one campus to the others in hope of cross-pollinating the students that might be in the North Campus versus Kendall, the Wolfson versus here. And I think of that as World Cup because, as you know, the World Cup is not always in one place.
Absolutely.
It moves from place to place specifically for that purpose of cross-pollinating and being able to share that enthusiasm. But since it's a contact sport, the more people the students meet, the better it is for them to practice, but to grow their networks of people who might help them in their business, or even if it's not their business and what they're going to do next.
As a native Miamian, as a Latino male, your work has taken you all across the globe. You've been very successful in your efforts. What is the landscape like for the Miami-Dade College student who's likely going to be Hispanic, African American, first generation in college? Is the environment more welcoming? What challenges have you encountered in your own career? And what advice might you give to young people who are just starting out?
So, I mean, you've described me when I started my career. The advice is to stick with it. I think there are a lot of people who will be helpful on that pathway as long as you're open to hear advice. I think great advice comes in all shapes and colors and sizes. Mm-hmm. I think increasingly there are role models that are Latino and African American, but there are too few. In fact, I worry about that, and it's in part why I volunteer my time at Miami-Dade Center to be able to bring those experiences. In my personal journey, though, I know that you have to have stick-withedness. You have to be resilient, and I think as a person of color, you sort of go in knowing that you need an extra dose of that because the regular dose isn't going to get you through. And I'd like to say that I've graduated from that, but in fact I haven't. Even as recently as this year, there are things that happen or events that are going on that people just misunderstand who you are based on what you look like. So rather than being judged by the content of your character, to paraphrase a very,
Dr. King.
Yeah, mm-hmm. but just just somebody who to me has always been inspirational since I was a little boy. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say an idol, but there must be an American word for that. But somebody I've looked up to. People judge you by what you look like, and I think that's unfortunate. But I think, and in fact, why I think entrepreneuring is so important, and innovation in particular, is that I think it happens everywhere. There are all sorts of inventions and ideas that have come from all over the world that we don't teach ourselves come from different places. We sort of come to imagine that they're all here. But, we wouldn't be sitting here if the zero hadn't been invented,
Sure.
Exactly. in Asia. I mean, and in fact, in some, much of arithmetic came from peoples in North Africa. So you sort of think of this and you realize that a lot of innovation is hiding in plain sight. I just think it has to be tapped.
Catalyze and tap, sure. We'll be right back. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Mr. Estabil.
Be creative. Be a hero. Be the solution. Be connected. Be innovative. Be global. Be successful. Be you. Be MDC. Be Miami-Dade College.
Welcome back to South Florida Innovators. I'm your host, H.D. Tony, and I'm here with Mr. José Estabil, who's an advisor to the Miami-Dade College Idea Center. And just that name provokes all sorts of images. I've been in this work 15, 16 years in Miami-Dade County, and I've never seen the energy and all the focus and the resources on entrepreneurship.
Right.
Now it's just like catalytic. I mean, if you ever had an idea that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, now is absolutely the time to do it. Talk to me about failure.
Oh, so failure, failure is the origin of wisdom. If we don't fail, we don't learn. It'd be great to think that we only learn by being successful. But in fact, and there's so many people who are quoted often in this, like Edison, about the successful idea versus the 10,000 that didn't work ahead of it. But in fact, failure is part of it. But in entrepreneuring, we try to teach failure that has to do with a learning aspect of it, meaning that we think of failure as the fertilizer for the next experience. So but there are ways of failing that can be quite tragic. I think that's one of those attributes that as a culture in general in the U.S. we share a lot of, and that people here who are successful at one thing try something else. And even when they fail at it, as a society, we don't stigmatize them as much as we would somewhere else. I think that's one of the real challenges here, particularly because we have an immigrant community where risk is not a good thing. And for many of us, coming to the United States was at the end of a long process, and it's just not as easy to do. And it manifests itself not just in people not taking the first step, but when they've been successful at one thing, fear of then starting something else, because then people will know that first one was just by luck. But in fact, it's not the case. I mean, not all things that one does are successful. My batting average, I think, is pretty good, and there goes another sports metaphor. But there are some prominent failures that I had that really taught me the value of friendship, of diversity in teams, but then also when to pivot, when to stop going at something, when it clearly isn't working, which we often have a very hard time letting go of.
You've attended and taught at some of the most well-known, well-respected institutions in our country, MIT, Brown, several others. And now you're at Miami-Dade College. And we think our students stand toe-to-toe with any other student anywhere around the country. So what has been your experience in working with our faculty? I know you did a symposia for faculty. What is your experience working in this environment versus working at, say, MIT or at Brown?
So I guess there are a couple of things that draw on. First is the wealth of diversity in the student body here. I just can't tell you just how wonderful it is. And I know it isn't just because each one of these students has something wonderful that they want to go do or are thinking about, but it's because science or studies show that diverse groups are just much more creative and better at whatever it is that they do than groups that are homogeneous. And so when I'm in environments that are homogeneous, I always worry about whether they're really going to instill not just an ability to work with all sorts of people, which is the most obvious benefits of diversity, but will they actually learn what excellence means? And I think absent that diversity, it's hard to understand what excellence looks like and how it works. There's a fellow, David Apfelbaum at MIT, who's been doing studies precisely in this area, and he's been able to show that diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams, but they generally don't feel they've done as well as homogeneous teams, which answers the second part of the observation that you were making about, well, what does it feel like to be here, is that I'm not sure people here understand how well they could be doing and what excellence looks like. And in particular, I'm sort of mindful of a lot of great ideas that come out of all sorts of places. So that's what I think about here most when I'm here is excellence. The second thing is that when I'm here, I'm also mindful that programs at the secondary school level that track kids into places don't always get it right. And in fact, and even when programs are rather good at tracking students, they don't provide the kind of opportunities over the summer that more privileged students have access to, that not only keeps them on track, but help them to accelerate and be very competitive to get into the more elite schools. You know, my personal story is had I not gone to Miami-Dade South Campus when I was in high school, I would never have been competitive as a high school student to go to a prestigious college, and nothing had changed about me. I was still me. And when I was in my MDC class, I was happy. I was learning a great deal. You know, it's the first place I studied physics and calculus, and I learned it well enough that I did well at those topics going forward in other environments. And the seed of interest and passion in math and science that I've had for lifelong was nurtured. And in fact, it was my first college experience here. And so I think these students are great, and I think so. But I do see challenges that are structural, that may not be at the level of the college, but in the externalities of the college, that the college tries to address for students, which I think is really admirable.
So as we close our conversation, you mentioned at the start of our talk that your expertise is in programming and knowing where we are and where we're going and how well we're doing it.
Yeah.
So where do you think we are in the maturation cycle of really catalyzing entrepreneurship for our students, for those who come in who may or may not have had any exposure or thought about entrepreneurship? Where are we, and what do you see as our next challenge?
Wow. So I'm mindful that Dr. Padron might be listening to this. So I think in particular, I think it's getting and continuing to have more students coming into the programs. If this is like a sport, to the degree that you can't meet the demand, you know that the program is successful. And I think the Idea Center has those early signs of success. This is a national trend, and MDC, I think, has seized on that trend at the right time. There are others who have been doing this for a little while longer, so they're great examples to learn from, which means great examples of things not to do, of programs or ideas that are known to sort of be weak and unsupportable. And so I think fundamentally it's tapping the students and having them start being their own interlocutors, having them designing programs, having them coming and saying, I really want to do this, can you help me do that? And as opposed to when, as either faculty or administrators, people are saying, oh, I'm going to do this great thing, students come participate. That in my experience has been the sort of pivot that this process takes off on its own, and then students internalize it and they see opportunity and their education tied to that experience, and that can be a very healthy feedback mechanism.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your
Thank
being
you.
on
It's
South
fun to
Florida
talk to you.
Innovators.
Lee.
You're a wealth of information, and I know our students and our faculty alike are benefiting from your time and your expertise working with the Idea Center. So I'm delighted to have had you as our guest on South Florida Innovators. And I hope you enjoyed our show today. Please tune in again as we try to keep you on tap with all of the new and emerging technologies, innovations, and exciting times happening in entrepreneurship in South Florida. Welcome, and thank you again for tuning in.